If we could get people to share stories about where courage is showing up or what resilience looks like to them, then it quite possibly could have an impact and just support people just through the power of storytelling. And that, I think, has started to bear true.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds, and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling.
So we are absolutely thrilled that you're here. It's really, really, really lovely to celebrate with family and friends, and we hope that you'll enjoy the night. We hope you'll enjoy the networking, talking to random strangers or people that you know and love.
My name is Di. I'm one part of the Double Ds. Donna, so you want to say hi?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I can't believe we've actually made it to 1 year of the podcast. So, yes, been great. So Anzac Day last year, Steve, who's over there, we interviewed and that was our first podcast. So we've done 20 episodes since. So it's fantastic. And this is our trial of doing a live one. See how we go.
Have we pressed play?
Yes, we have.
We have, okay. Good to know. Okay, nice and tight. Well, we're in a venue called Live Hybridly, and Darren, the very lovely Darren, who I met recently, has offered to host us here, which is awesome. It's a great community space. We hope you'll come again. Lots of things happening. And Darren has also got a bit of a podcast as a side hustle. So if you're listening, Live Hybridly is down on the corner of Parry and Quarry in Fremantle. Come on down. And Darren has also kindly offered to ask us some questions so that we can kind of know what it's like to be on the receiving end. And then we're going to maybe ask you to ask us some questions if you want to, but then we're going to have a little break and have a second part, which will be inviting some of our previous guests to come back and tell us a bit about what happened next after they were on the podcast, because we thought that might also be a nice thing to celebrate. There's been a few great stories come out of it. Mainly, we just want you to have a good time, and then we've got some amazing music with Andrew Winton for the rest of the night until the last man standing.
Yeah, so it's fantastic to have everyone here. I wouldn't mind just sort of mentioning that it's great to have family, friends and other guests, and just also to mention the other previous podcast guests who are here. So if you can put up your hand, Steve Cox from episode 1. We've got Neo Korea, who just arrived. She's from episode 5 from Venezuela. I don't know if is Rebecca here yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Think, no.
We've got Tara, I just saw arrive from episode 7 from the founder of Seagulls. Hello, Tara. Susan Saliba. The very inspiring story about Africa, her charity in Africa in episode 11. And also Simon Neighbour, who is the owner of More and More Cafe, a very popular place in Fremantle. And he had some great stories about being a chef all over the world. So, yeah, it's great.
Awesome. So let's get started. We thought we'd give you a bit of background about why we started the podcast, how we started it. We're complete and utter novices, and it's been a bit of a ride, but Darren's going to come up and interview us informally.
Welcome, everybody. It's Hybrid Warehouse, not Live Hybridly, but we would like to, don't mean to correct you on that one.
Do.
It's all good, just in case you look it up and you're trying to find Live Hybridly. But the Live Hybridly is an ethos that we're trying to encourage people to think more about. So, but you can listen about that on our podcast. It's not about me tonight. So as Diane mentioned, it's my job right now, which I feel like I'm on a really big chair, really a bit taller than you guys. That I've got a few questions, and part of it's just about understanding why the girls did the podcast and the idea behind it. So you sort of get behind the scenes for those that have either been on it or listened to it. You sort of get to hear why that actually has happened. So the first question, what's the theme of the Double Ds?
Oh, Donna, you start with that one.
Yeah, so we, I think Di and I, when we first started the podcast, it just came out that we wanted to share people's stories, and it did come that the stories that we were sharing, there was a lot of courage and resilience, and so that's why we made it as the stories of courage and resilience. And I think it's helped me a lot because I need a lot of courage and resilience in my life at the moment. So the podcast guests have inspired me a lot in my own life as well.
Yeah, and I think I remember back sort of thinking, what did Donna and I have in common as well? And when we started talking about the idea and what would be sort of relevant to people, we this saying about the things which are most personal, that we experience as most personal, are usually actually the most universal. So those things that I think, oh, this is only about me, actually when we talk about them, when we share the story about them, what tends to happen is people go, oh yeah, me too. And so it's a Carl Jung saying, I think, that which is most personal is actually universal. And so we started toying with that idea that if we could get people to share stories about where courage is showing up or what resilience looks like to them, then it quite possibly could have an impact and just support people just through the power of storytelling. And that, I think, has started to bear true.
Has it been what you thought it would be so far? When you had that moment together talking and you had the idea and it seemed like you were on the same page, so far is it what you thought it would be?
I didn't think it would really, I hadn't really thought about what it would be like. And when you start it up, it's very focused on the technical side, like how the hell do we do a podcast? But then once you figured that out, I mean, it worked out perfectly. Di happened to have a podcast studio at her work. But then it's more about, well, how are we going to get guests? But I've never worried about finding guests because guests just appear out of nowhere. So a good example is I kept seeing Steve walking along the path at South Beach, and then I met Neo in a sauna. So yeah, people just...
It all happens in Freo.
I always believe that the right guests will come along at the right time. I think the distribution and the marketing side is something I didn't really think about as much, but that's quite a big part. But I think there's been a lot of connections and community grow out of it, which is something I hadn't thought about, which has been great.
I actually think that the podcasting itself, the interviews, is actually the easy bit. You know, often you just think about interviewing people. It's not everybody's comfort zone, I get that, but really that's such a small part of what podcasting actually is. And I'm not really huge into social media, and so that's a challenge for us. I'm not hugely into tech. Very thankfully, there's a very small Mickey Mouse, follow the bouncing ball type scenario in front of us. It's the same at the University of Curtin where we podcast. It's pretty much plug and play. So those bits in some ways are not the difficult bits. But I was also thinking about when we first started, just actually how the idea came about, Donna, like how we actually decided to start.
Yeah, so that was when I just had a dream one night and woke up that I had to start a podcast. So that was quite strange. But then it was interesting because I was telling Di, who I actually hadn't seen for a while, and we went for a walk a week later, and I was telling her about the dream. And then you said...
Well, I've always wanted to start a podcast. But I kind of had, and it must have been 2020 because it was when COVID hit and I was living in Scotland at the time. And, you know, like everyone, we all had to pivot in our businesses, and I was doing a lot of facilitation in person and coaching in person, and all of a sudden you had to do everything online. And so I started running some of the workshops and some of the reflective spaces and things that I did online, and people would often comment on my voice. And I was like, all right, okay. But it did stay with me that how could I use my voice in a different way, you know? And if that's what people were saying, then, you know, maybe there's another mechanism that I can use that in my work. And so at that point I was thinking, oh, yeah, I'd quite like to, maybe a podcast. But I knew that I didn't want to do it on my own. I think I was feeling at that point in my life that I had enough things that I was doing on my own. I had separated. I was living on my own. I was trying to build a business on my own. It was like, I don't need more things where I'm on my own. And actually what was good for my resilience was to collaborate. But it wasn't until I came back to Australia that the sort of partner came along really from that walk and it was literally, yeah, Con, let's do it.
Yeah, we had a couple of discussions and we had similar ideas and we thought, let's give it a go.
And it was always a podcast was the best vehicle. Like obviously you that dream was pretty evident it was a podcast, but was that sort of the best vehicle? A few other ways of going about it, but why podcasting was the way that you both chose to get your voice out there and talk about things together?
I think it was just because of this dream. It was, you must start a podcast. It's hard to
YouTube
explain.
channels or anything like that. It was pretty straightforward. So
there's been so many strange things, very strange and mysterious things going on in my life for the last few years. So, if I have dreams like that, I usually go, okay.
Just run with it, yeah.
Run with it.
What a stupid question. Everyone, you mentioned the least concern is having people to talk to, and it's interesting when everyone's got a story, don't they? So when how do you find when you approach someone who you think might be a good guest who's got a story from what you know of them, either a lot or a little, how do you find talking to the guest about coming on?
Yeah, it's a great question because often I think when people talk, they don't realise actually the power of their own story. So you're chatting away to them and then you actually realise that is a really powerful story. If it's impacted me, it's likely to impact other people. And so often it's about us recognising in a conversation, and it could be literally at the sauna, or it could be just at a networking event or at work or wherever that is, and you hear something and you think, gosh, that really impacted me. And usually if you tell the person that, they'll often say, I didn't realise that just happened to me and I didn't think it was that interesting. And I was like, no, that actually is a really powerful story. And then from that, if you make the invitation, often people will say, yeah, okay, if you think it's got any value. And it's like, well, yeah, probably. And then there's something about, I think, when getting people to actually feel relaxed to do the podcast itself, often it's just about how, meeting with them, making sure they feel comfortable with the parts of the story that they want to tell. Because I think sometimes people are afraid that they might overshare, or they'll say something that they wish they hadn't said. And so sometimes it's just that reassurance as well and honing in on the bits of the story that gives them the confidence to tell it. What about you, Donna?
I also think, especially we have interviewed a few older people and, for example, Lawrence Brown, who's 89, he has lived so many things in his life, and actually Steve Cox is another example of they've got so many stories of courage and resilience in their life, and I think over time we've realised we need to focus on just one part of their story so then we can delve a little bit deeper into it rather than jumping around to talk about everything that's happened because it's just impossible. There's just so much there, so it's better to speak a little bit more in more detail about a certain component of their life. This episode is sponsored by the Speakers Institute Premier Bootcamp. So the Speakers Institute teaches and coaches people into how to speak in public. And in early December 2024, I attended a 3-day Premier Bootcamp myself, and it was a completely life-changing experience. I went along to learn how to share my story, part of my personal story, in a better way and in a way that I wouldn't become as emotional when I was telling it. And so I started off in a very bad way, very emotional, but with all the skills, the humour, the care and compassion of the coaches and of the other participants, by the end of day 3, I was able to deliver a 6-minute presentation on part 1 of my personal story. So I was very proud of that, and I found it a life-changing experience. So if you want to read a little bit more about my own experience in the Speakers Institute Premier Bootcamp, you can do that, and you can sign up as well if you're interested. It's a 3-day bootcamp, and they have them throughout the year in various locations. So go to donnasbalconyviews.com.au/public speaking. So that's donnasbalconyviews.com.au/public speaking, and you can transform your public speaking like I did.
Yeah, and I think the theme that you guys have chosen with resilience and courage, as you get older, we're faced with those moments, aren't we? That, or even when you're younger, but it's, I think the theme can resonate with pretty much everybody. So do you find that you also have your own moments of talking to someone, and then you sort of, it's a bit cathartic having a conversation when you're actually interviewing somebody else, but in the moment a conversation goes a certain way, do you find yourselves going, well, actually, this is actually great for me too, as the interviewer?
Definitely. So many times that's happened. I've gotten a lot of inspiration from everyone we've interviewed. I suppose in particular John Sanders, he's a person who's 86 when we interviewed him, and he had done a circumnavigation 3 times, triple circumnavigation around the world sailing on his own. So he was almost 2 years on his own on a boat, and the amazing thing with him is that he said that he never, ever once thought about giving up. And I just found that very inspirational, and we had to do his interview in 2 parts because he wasn't well on the first one. And in between, I did the Perth marathon, and I thought, I was really struggling at one point, a few points, and I thought, well, I can't even think about giving up because John Sanders went for 2 years and never thought about giving up. So just, and little things happen in life and I think back to, that person did that or said that. And yeah, we've really got I've had a lot of inspiration from our different people we've interviewed.
Yeah, and I would agree. And Susan Sleever's another one. You know, Susan, your episode, I remember meeting you for the first time. Someone recommended you for us and meeting you, and it was real evidence to me of resilience through, you know, your age and what you can achieve and what you can start from the age of 50. If you listen to Susan's story, it's incredible. And I'm not going to tell you too much because I want you to listen to it if you haven't. But that was so inspirational to me because, you know, what Susan started, you know, and has grown over the last 20 years, it was like, well, you know, Di, that's you, that's your age. You could start doing that and that could have an amazing impact. So there's that kind of impact of interviewing somebody where you really connect with something because you're at that stage that they're talking about when they started something or when something kicked in for them. I've been like close to tears many times just because there's that little thread of something that you're just going, you know, I'm going to hold it together, but also just talking about it. I don't prepare very much. I shouldn't say that. But
the other double D does all the
The other double D
research.
does all the research. Yeah, talk about...
Oh, it's a good team. It's a good team.
Yeah, exactly. But joking apart, we bring very different things, and I think that's also what makes it work. You know, Donna is an amazing researcher and does do a lot of that background work that I'm very grateful for. And Donna's probably like, yeah, it's all right for you, Di. You just get to show up.
No, I'm very grateful for all the good questioning that you do, Di, so it's good. It's a good combination.
I think the combination is actually pretty powerful because it's more of a conversation as opposed to an interview when you're doing it, when you're not as prepared. Like even these notes are a couple of questions that we had to make sure that I got in, but it definitely feels better, I think, to have a conversation. But then to have your background going into the interview with the research, it's pretty powerful for both for you guys to feel organised, but also I'd imagine that the guests also feeds off you for that. Do you find that how do you prepare a guest? You mentioned about having a chat to them and stuff, but obviously the way you prepare individually you just touched on, but what about a guest and in the middle of it making them feel comfortable to talk?
Yeah, and at the beginning, and some of the guests might talk to this, but, you know, sometimes we'll just have a wee practice because something happens when people put a set of headphones on and you press play. people just start getting more nervous, less confident. It just happens. It's just what happens. So it'll often be just about making a joke or just tell me about something really innocuous so that they start talking. And then often I just want to start pressing play so that they don't even know. And I usually don't do that. The other thing that happens often is that you really wish once you'd press stop recording that you'd just press start again, because what people often say at the end, they almost breathe a sigh of, oh, it's over, and now something relaxes in their system, and then you get this amazing story that comes after that. But I just think that's what happens, when people start to relax.
During an example of that was Lawrence Brown. I did press record when we'd finished the interview, because he started telling us why he'd come to Australia, which was basically his mother remarried and his stepfather didn't really want him to be around. And that ended up being, I think, one of the most powerful parts of his interview. So it was, and he of course, we asked him if we could put it in. So, yeah.
What about, you've been on both sides, you listen to podcasts, obviously, and then now you're being the interviewer. Do you think listening or talking is more powerful from a resilience and courage point of view?
Well, the coach and psychologist in me kind of says you can't have storytelling without great listening, because if you don't give people space, then they can't say anything, So part of it is also just letting people talk. And sometimes the best interviews are where you hardly say anything. You ask one or two questions and the person just goes.
But there's also the people listening to the podcast, and what we've realised is that once it gets released, we don't know what's going to happen, and there has been some quite amazing things that have happened. But I think our latest episode with Lockie O'Donoghue, so he started a charity when he was in his early 20s with a friend, because they had two friends that they lost to suicide in their early 20s, and he started a charity. And his episode has been kind of like triple the amount of downloads we've had for any other episode, and about 80% in the USA. And with his episode, I thought, wow, what he had to say in that to us could really help save people's lives, really, because he sort of talked about what you can do if you're worried about someone, what can you do if you're worried about yourself, and how you can build up these supporting arms of mental wellness, so that if something happens to you, you're far more resilient and you're far more likely to be able to get through it. So that when that happens, you think, well, we've provided that opportunity to get a really important message out to people.
Yeah, it's an amazing vehicle, isn't it?
And I think one of the things as well is when we started, one of the things that got in the way for me of doing it, I think, was like, isn't there enough podcasts out there? And there are, there's loads of them. And I think there's also something really nice about this being WA people for WA people kind of thing. It's local people. We don't dial people in from other states or other places, even though that would be easy to do. The way that it's worked is that we found local people, and it's always done in the studio, partly because of our technical capability, I think. But actually the way that it's worked out I really love, because those stories are getting surfaced in WA.
Even Bill and Pina, they came in, they're from Melbourne, about the Caminos, but they were in Perth for 10 days. And sometimes we find out different people are coming across on holidays for a week or something, and we get them to come in and talk to us in person and record a podcast.
What's the hardest part about being podcasters? Question without notice, that one.
It's all the things around it, that like the research, the setting up, the social media. We get ours recorded, edited overseas, which means Donna does a whole lot of stuff in the background to get that tiny little card converted into a file that goes across and gets edited. It costs money to do it. We don't, that's hard to keep going when it's costing money. And just the time and energy it takes around thinking about it, and and we really have got a long way to go. We're not doing videos, we're not doing half the things we could be doing, and even with that as a side hustle, it takes a lot of time. And I absolutely can 100% say Donna does a lot of that.
Well, it's funny because if I were to say the hardest thing, I don't think any of that for me is hard. I actually really enjoy it. But the hardest thing still for me is us putting ourselves out there, because, we don't know what people are going to think about it. And it is, you kind of have to have the courage, I suppose, to do it in the first place. And I find that's still a bit hard. But I think the good bit about it is you just think about it's not really about us. It's about us helping other people come in and tell their stories. And so it's about the other people and us serving in some way. And this series in particular, this season 2, is about helping our listeners to have more courage and resilience. So that's also so that makes it easier to put ourselves out there, because we're providing some important tools for people.
And I guess that comes from having Series 1 under your belt now. So you've got some experience, you've got the thought, and now it's out there and you sort of know what it's like. But that creative process of from your dream to having such an impact on someone, and the ability to then have the courage to press send out into the world. Do you remember the first time and how you felt the very first one? Were you going, oh, shit, and then you press it? Can you tell us about that? Because no doubt that's just got easier as time's got on.
We also wonder, is anyone actually going to listen to this? But
we actually wondered, do any of you listen to any of this?
But we decided to, Steve was the third person we interviewed, but we decided to put his out first because it was such a compelling story, and especially the part about going to the bingo game. Well, you're in your 40s, Steve, and finding out that you had a sister that you never knew you had because she had been taken in during the stolen generation. So that was a very powerful story. So I think it was. We were nervous but excited as well.
And also, you kind of don't want to ask for too much feedback because you'd be like, I don't know, I want to know the answer to that. What was nice for me was that, it actually let people around the world who I knew, friends, family from other countries, hear our voice. And, they said that was a really nice effect. So they were just happy to hear that, I think, sometimes, as well as just, I think often when we don't back ourselves, we've got this collective backing that you forget about. There's people who are really saying, go for it. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. It doesn't matter if it's not polished. Just do it. We love the fact that you're doing it and doing something. So
I think we did both feel very proud that we had this idea and this dream, and then we've actually got an episode. So it was good.
Yeah, and you just make sure you don't look at the stats. So you don't know if
Cheers,
anyone's
Darren.
listening. The first one, you're just like, I don't want to know if anyone's listening or not. But it takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing, like ironically given that's part of your theme, but it really does. And the fact that you're creating a sense of belonging for people to be part of your own community that you're created with your own podcast. So you should both be really proud of that, and congratulations on doing that as well.
thank you. We hope you've loved today's episode. We always enjoy bringing these to you. We'd love to grow the podcast, and one of the ways that we can do that is to ask you to like us, to follow us, to give us a review, but also just to share it with your friends and family.